go. And we'll begin just a second. Okay, the poll wouldn't let you scroll down for more questions. That's a good one. Hey, Chris, I don't know what to do with this. The poll won't let them scroll down. Chris, if you know how to do that, let me know. Is that a me thing or is that a them thing?
I'm not sure it should. I mean, I can scroll down on my view of it, so I'm not sure. It might be on their end.
Got it.
Kevin, this is Melinda. It worked for me.
Okay, cool. Thank you. It works perfectly on my computer, but you just never know. So no prizes involved in the poll. Just get your gauge of where you're at. So
Kevin, it also worked for me. This is Heidi. It worked for me, but I actually had to scroll down with my mouse and not use my arrows.
Oh, mouse, not arrows. There you go. And now I'm noticing that the person who said that sent it to me privately. I won't say your name, but yeah, you got mouse, not arrows. And if you're mouseless, I don't know what you do. But we will let these last couple in, and we're going to go ahead and go. Good morning, everyone. Again, we'll use the chat feature and we'll see what's going on. But today, my name's Kevin Darty, and we're going to talk about the history aspect of agriculture. Big news. You couldn't go anywhere without it this weekend. Not only the 4th of July, but also Alexander Hamilton, the musical Hamilton. Lots of people saw it, or if you didn't see it, I highly encourage you to. Interesting fact about Hamilton. Hamilton was very much so a captain of industry, about commerce. And one part of the musical that really is true, Hamilton and Jefferson did not see eye to eye on a number of things. One thing that they did agree on, which kind of pained him, Hamilton, and in his report on manufacturers to Congress in 1791, Hamilton agrees that it ought to be readily conceded that the cultivation of the earth as the primary and most certain source of national supply has intrinsically a strong claim to preeminence over every other kind of industry. So whereas Hamilton was really about commerce, he was really about, and again, the whole banking system and what went on with manufacturers, he really agreed with Jefferson that agriculture did play a strong role. So we're going to go ahead and end the poll here and just show where that ends, and I'll share the results with you. What U.S. founding farmer was the first to breed the mule and breed mules crossing a male donkey with a female horse? 45% of you said Thomas Jefferson. How many counties in Illinois? 79%, 102. And what was the last county founded in the state? 45% said Ford. I'm going to stop sharing the results, and I'm going to get out of my poll, and I'm going to go on to the answers. So here we go. Maybe. So our first mule breeder at his farm in Mount Vernon, Virginia farm, George Washington experimented with crop rotations, with new seeds and plants. He also became the nation's first mule breeder. So it was George Washington, whereas we don't necessarily always think of Washington as a farmer, he certainly was. So the answer, why is Washington called the father of the American mule? He's the one that first gave it to him. He was trying to breed a better draft animal. That was his goal. He believed that these mules would revolutionize farming. This is from a question. This is from a slide of an activity we're going to talk about here in a little bit called Growing a Nation. Those of you with pencils and pens, write down growinganation.org. So Washington was the first mule breeder. Next, how many counties are there in the state of Illinois? The data below shows the 102 counties, and if you go here at our demographics.com, Illinois-demographics.com, you can get the counties by population. 102 counties in Illinois, 102. Now, interestingly enough, what we're going to talk about is the first counties and how we founded and what went on with Illinois and agriculture. And our last county founded in the state was Ford County. Ford County. You would travel on through Ford County if you go on I-57 from Chicago to Carbondale on 57. You pass through Ford County. Again, my name is Kevin Darty, and I'm the education director here for the Ag in a Classroom program. And I spent 10 years teaching junior high and high school history in a bedroom community of Champaign called Muhammad. I taught at Muhammad Seymour for 10 years. And I have a passion for history, for what goes on, how it works. And we're going to talk about the history and agriculture today. Again, if you have questions, use the chat feature, but we are going to talk about history. So kind of a rough overview of what we're going to do is we're going to talk about U.S. history and how you might incorporate these general themes throughout. You're already teaching agriculture, you're already teaching history, and a number of things you already do. I just want to make sure that you see those and make sure that they are all in front of you. So we're going to talk about the general themes of agriculture, and then we are going to talk about this growing a nation. Growing a nation. It's a U.S. It's a look at U.S. agriculture from a historic lens. Then we're going to get into Illinois history. We're going to talk about a couple of things: the prehistory before statehood, actually what happened to statehood, coming together during statehood, and our counties forming. We're also going to talk about a timeline and the Illinois history ag mag, as well as our magic kit, multidisciplinary agriculture integrated curriculum. We have an Illinois magic kit, and we'll talk about that. And then finally, we're going to integrate some books and literacy. We're going to talk about that. So first up is history all around you. History all around you. So I just put this kind of sorted together in a thematic way. You can't go back to school without apples. There are apples on your bulletin board, that type of thing. Johnny Appleseed. Not only is Johnny Appleseed a huge part of apples and how it comes back together, but the geography and the historic timeline and the science behind it. In our, I will be referencing these, but on our website, agintheclassroom.org, if you click on teacher resources, the second or third thing down under teacher resources is a thing called Ag Readers. Each of our ag readers has a timeline to go along with each topic. And I just pulled this one from apples. Now again, this is written at about the 4th grade level, so you can water it down or bulk it up as much as you wish. The historic timeline, what we can do is you can see through here, we go all the way back to 6500 BC, coming up to the present. And when you get to the early 1800s, John Chapman, better known as Johnny Appleseed, started many small orchards throughout Ohio and Indiana as he walked west. But we give you a timeline of all of these apple activities. So easy way to integrate apples with history. Look at the timelines. Again, all of our ag readers have a timeline aspect to it to try and put these activities in order. You'll also notice apple production. There's a map on there to talk about where do our apples come from. Illinois, we do grow some apples. We are an apple deficit state. Most of our land is in corn and soybeans. We do have some orchards, but we don't grow enough for all of us to eat ours. So where do they come from? And we actually have the geography of where our apples come from. So when you see them at Walmart, you see them at the local grocery store, you'll be able to track where they're from. Again, something to think about. If you're enjoying an apple right now, from Walmart, I want you just to stop and think about this. Apples are harvested in the fall. We don't have U.S. apples yet. If it's a U.S. apple, it's been placed in storage. It's been placed in storage since last fall. Cool part about it is you probably didn't even notice until you stop and think about it. So you might be enjoying an apple from New Zealand or from a Southern Hemisphere place, but right now, if you go and you get a Washington or a Michigan or a Oregon apple, a New York apple, those have been placed in storage, and they've been placed in cold storage, and they are they're still crisp and they're still tasty, and that's what we do. So remember that. We don't start getting apples. You'll see local apples coming into the stores in September and October when apples come about. So now, those of you who are thinking, oh my gosh, how did they do that? I want you to think back. We talked a little bit about Laura Ingalls Wilder in our activity on the scrambled states. Back in the day, they used to put things in the root cellar. They kept them fresh and used them throughout time. Think of these big cold storage units as just basically a root cellar. So you start off with apples, you've already got history there. Next, harvest. As we get into harvest, corn and soybeans and pumpkins, I want you to take a look at the Sacagawea $1 coin. Sacagawea and Lewis and Clark are celebrated on the $1 coin with the Three Sisters Garden. On the front, you'll see Sacagawea, our Shoshone guide for Lewis and Clark. And on the back, you'll notice that the Native American women are planting corn and pumpkins and beans. The corn grew tall, the beans grow up around it, and the squash, the pumpkins, their leaves provided shade so everything could grow, kept the weeds down, but you also had that work between the legumes of the beans and the corn helping with nitrogen and making everything grow together. So that idea of a Three Sisters garden and how everything works together. Last week, Chris talked about sustainability and that idea of using materials to make sure that everything works together. Folks, this isn't a new concept. We've been doing it for a long time. So the harvest, as you think about this, think about harvest using corn, soybeans, and pumpkins. My next slide. Okay, so that gets you through harvest, and you're talking about that. We come up to Thanksgiving. And the idea of Thanksgiving and where did it come from and the history behind it. So history and pilgrims, this is all detailed in great detail in Gail Gibbons' book, Thanksgiving Is. If you don't have that, my younger level readers, I highly encourage that. That's a great book. Again, Gail Gibbons, an Illinois author. But Thanksgiving, not only the aspect of the pilgrims and the Mayflower, but how about this? Abraham Lincoln declaring Thanksgiving as a national holiday, what it means. So as you get into that history behind it, where did it come from and what goes on? Additionally, one cool thing that the American Farm Bureau does, and we'll share this information as we get closer, they figure out what the price for an average Thanksgiving meal is. So you could totally integrate your economics and then look at the price of an average Thanksgiving for a family throughout time. So a neat way to look at that over time. January comes along. Well, let's go on to National Milk Day. National Milk Day. National Milk Day, on our website, we actually have a little tab for you, National Milk Day. And National Milk Day is celebrated on January 12th. And that's the day that milk was first delivered, they think. Back in 1787, the day that milk was first delivered is celebrated on National Milk Day. We've celebrated this at Ag in the Classroom for a couple of years, but you know, one of those things that happens when we first decided to celebrate this, people said, well, you know, that's going to be the first snow day. Well, yeah, it is. But even as we learned with our dairy field trip, even as we learned, even if it is a bad snow day, the farmers are still going to have to milk the cows. But we're celebrating milk and how important milk is and where it goes on. We do have a timeline of milk as well. This is from one of our lesson resources. You click on this lesson booklet and this milestones in milk history, talking about that. A couple of things. I know Chris shared this when he did his dairy activities, talking about pasteurization and where did it come from and how pasteurization has changed through time. So again, a history activity to go along with milk. 100 days. A number of people celebrate 100 days. Why not make it historical and why not make it agriculture? So one thing to think about is all of these important inventions that are 100 years old. If you look back, and we're going to give you some, I'm going to give you some samples and some tips about what happened 100 years ago in Illinois history, what happened in agricultural history. You know, who knew a year or two ago, if you were celebrating being a pandemic, you know, in 1918, 2018, if people had talked about that, maybe they would have thought they wouldn't have considered that. Now we're living through this history again as things are changing. Think about what's going on in agriculture and make it historical. With that, you can go on to plants and pollinating as we get into spring. A couple of activities. First off, John Deere. What John Deere did with the plow and how he pulled up the plow and changing not only the way that we plant in Illinois, but around the nation. So John Deere would be a great one to start with. Cyrus McCormick and his reaper, the McCormick reaper, and bringing this together that'll eventually become the combine. So you got planting with Deere and harvesting. Again, they're all going to come together. And then, of course, Gregor Mendel and his experiments with peas and crossbreeding and what happens with Mendel and his early attempts at pollination and making sure that everything crossed the way it did and discovering what happens with those various plants. So that's a brief look at a couple of things that we could talk about throughout your scope and sequence. Again, you're probably talking about apples, or at least you typically have a bulletin board on them. We're definitely going to do harvest and pumpkins and Thanksgiving, and then even as we get into what happens in the cold weather and milk, and then into pollinators. So a number of ways that we could talk about that. And of course, in December, one other way that you could do that is don't forget Illinois' birthday, December 3rd, 1818. So Illinois, just over 200 years old. But first, I want to talk a little bit about national activities from Growing a Nation. And this is just a kind of a startling fact of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. And as I planned this session to come right after the 4th of July holiday, think about the Declaration of Independence. And where we were at down here near Bloomington, a lot of radio shows were actually having people read the Declaration of Independence. It seemed like there was a lot more concentration on history on popular radio versus just playing music. People were at home. But one interesting fact is if you look at the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, if you break down their occupation, most of the signers had both a primary occupation and a secondary occupation. But if you look at the breakdown, I'm sure not a lot of you are surprised that 25, almost half of the people who wrote the Declaration, signed the Declaration, were lawyers. We also had a number of merchants. But then if you look at the plantation owners and farmers, some of our secondary occupations included plantation owners and merchants and surveyors and printers. So you start to notice how many people directly connected to the land signed the Declaration of Independence. One thing to stop and think about now is, what's that percentage? What's that percentage? How many do we have that are directly connected to the land? There are several. We have a couple urban farmers, people that are in Congress now that are urban farmers or specialize in some type of farming. You don't see a lot of typical farmers and ranchers, but you do see a lot of lawyers still. So interestingly enough, though, at the time of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, a third of the people had a direct connection to land and farming. It's much lower than that now. Remember, back in that time, still, just about everyone had a small subsistence plot. If they weren't large plantation owners, they surely had a cow, because again, we're not going to get into milk delivery. We're not going to get into milk delivery until the 1800s. So they had a cow, they had a garden. There was a lot more direct connection to the land than running to the local Walmart or superstore. So I'm referencing a fact called Growing a Nation. And Growing a Nation, I am going to talk a little bit about some founding farmer activities. Two of our favorite books are Farmer George Plants a Nation by Peggy Thomas and Thomas Jefferson, Grows a Nation. Thomas describes her book, Farmer George Grows a Nation, as her accidental agriculture book. We're huge fans of Peggy Thomas, and she's written over 100 books, close to 200 now. But she and her family went to Mount Vernon, and she was captured by the gardens. She was captured by the farm. And as a children's author, she wanted to look and stop and see, hey, has anybody else written about George Washington as a farmer? We know about George Washington, the statesman. We know about him as the Revolutionary War hero, but has anybody ever written a book about Washington, the farmer? Well, she wrote the book, Farmer George Plants a Nation, and it's, again, one of our favorites, and it's beautifully illustrated. Again, just beautifully illustrated, and talks about Washington and his role on the farm, what he did. It does cover his mules. Washington, in addition to his mules, he also holds a couple of patents. He did a lot of work with soil and fertilization, and he holds a patent on a wheat planter. A picture of his wheat planter here. Holds a patent on his wheat planter as well. Illinois Ag in the Classroom, we do have a lesson booklet that goes along with this. You'll see it at the link there on Washington. The Ag in the Classroom network around the nation, we found Peggy's book and liked it and brought her together, and we helped encourage her to write other books. Her second book on agriculture was Thomas Jefferson Grows a Nation. And again, Washington planted a nation. You see the metaphor, you see, he's starting the nation, the founding farmer. Jefferson and his idea of growing the nation, not only his gardening expertise, his work with the University of Virginia and education, but also then the Louisiana Purchase and what it meant. She is in production of a third book about Lincoln. I have had a chance to read it. I'm really looking forward to it. She's working on a book on Lincoln, and she's also working on a book on Norman Borlaug. I'm actually halfway through I'm reading that as well. Not out yet, should be out soon. But we do have lesson booklets for both Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. All right, so our next another lesson booklet that I want to talk about is one that it's one that we forget sometimes. Did a lesson booklet a couple of years ago called Change for a Dollar. Change for a Dollar. And you can find it there, or just in our Illinois Ag in the Classroom site, up in the search engine at agintheclassroom.org, type in Change for a Dollar, and you will pull up this lesson booklet. And the first half of the lesson booklet is reference material. And what I did was I took all of the people, this is one that I actually wrote, so I took all of the presidents and famous people that are on coins and bills, all of the people that are on coins and bills, and I linked them back to agriculture. Now, it's kind of funny, some of them have more direct connections to agriculture. They were farmers, they did specific things. Others, you have to stop and think about them. So I picked one here. President Kennedy, our 35th president. First off, he issued a proclamation to mark the 1962 as the USDA's centennial agriculture year. The U.S. Department of Agriculture was founded in the Lincoln administration, so 1862. He increased federal inspection of food, drugs, meat, and poultry. So again, that whole idea of bringing it from the farm to the consumer. Most importantly, Kennedy established the Peace Corps, and what it does with farmers in third world countries, helping them improve their local diets, improving their income through various farming techniques. Additionally, the Peace Corps as an ecological, again, going back to the lessons Chris shared just last week, that idea of the environment, protecting the environment. There are other activities to do in that booklet that have to do with economics and where it comes from, how food gets there, percentages, that type of thing. But I think you'll enjoy the first half of the book on here are the people, here are what they did with agriculture. Again, it's a lesson booklet you can find. It's called Change for a Dollar. So those are some Illinois materials that we have available, but I want to take a look at this activity sheet. I'm going to give you just a minute, and this is called In the Good Old Days activity sheet. There are 25 activities here. This is in the booklet, Growing a Nation. It's a website we're going to talk about just in a minute, but take just a minute and read these. There are 25 of them, and mentally make a checklist. How many of these have you done? Have you done? I'm going to give you just a minute. Go through there and put your number in the chat box, please. Put your number in the chat box. Give me another couple seconds here. If you would put your number that you've actually completed in the chat box. How many of those have you done? Seeing lots of numbers, 20, 16, 17. Uh-oh, we got one at 2. Hopefully that meant to be they were supposed to do 20. All right, so our activity with this is to stop and think about what you've done. Now, I want you to put yourself in the, seat of your students. So for your students, if you were to hand this out, would the numbers be higher or lower? All right. So as a student, what they could do is they pack this up and they stop and they think about this. Have they done things with wool? You know, making a pie, I have a feeling that that number might have gone up since March 17th. But, you know, it's kind of hard to gather eggs if you don't have chickens. More people are doing chickens, making jam or jelly, making bread without a machine. Some of those activities, we might actually see an increase during this time. But watch black and white TV, what's that? Ate only food prepared at home for an entire week. In February, I bet that number was a lot lower for our students versus what it's been since March. Played a vinyl record album. It's kind of funny, vinyl's back in. Used exercise equipment, recycled paper, programmed a VCR. What is a VCR, right? Downloaded music from the internet or kept a 100-day streak on Snapchat. What they've done with this is you've got this activity sheet. You give it to your students, have them do it, then have them ask a classmate, who else has done this? Then you take it home to a parent or guardian, have them do that. So again, we're starting to see the generations that this comes up with. And then finally, ask their grandparents or an adult over 65. Kind of a cool activity to stop and think about what they've done with this. One of my favorites, you know, going barefoot for a whole week. When I was a kid, we used to do that all the time. And I don't remember being so hot or me being so impacted by the heat like we might be later today. But this is in the good old days activity sheet. I really like this to get a feel for what's going on. And if you notice, a lot of these have direct connections to agriculture and the land. All right, let's go the other way. This is found at Growing a Nation. And if you go to growinganation.org, growinganation.org, this is the timeline that you come up with, all right? Several years ago, Growing a Nation was an interactive CD. And CDs, for some of those in the audience that are a little younger, those used to be in your computer. We don't have those anymore. So they've transitioned and they've made this an online resource. So if you go to growinganation.org, growinganation.org, you'll find this major screen set. Sandy asked, where is the activity found? At growinganation.org. It's an interactive timeline of the history of agriculture in the United States. And you click on Explore. All right, that's going to take you to a number of resources. All right, so that'll take you to a number of resources. That's the first way you can find this. The second way you can find this is via the Ag in the Classroom national website, which is at agclassroom.org. I've also got all of this linked. The slideshow is linked, and it will be on our blog, beyondthebarndoor.wordpress.com. Actually, it's already up, but that's where you'll find it. So you'll find that. So the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to growinganation.org, and I'm going to go there from here, I hope. All right, so this is what you find. This is what you find. And what you'll find from this, are various factors. They've broken this down into different chapters. All right, so we're going to go to different, chapters here. So let's just pick this one.
Kevin, we're not seeing.
You're not seeing this because I clicked on it and I need to stop sharing that. That's a good call. Thank you, Melinda. So I got to stop share, and then I got to go back to share again. Love it when that happens. Here we go. So we're going to go to Growing a Nation, and we're going to share this. All right. So what you're going to see is you'll see growinganation.org. Melinda, you can see it now. Yep. I'm open.
Yes.
Good. Okay. So we're going to go to the Seeds of Change. This is just the first chapter, and it's broken down into various little snippets of what goes on from America and our 1600 founding all the way up until the this first part goes to the 1920s. I do want to show you one activity here. And you'll also notice that as you scroll down, you can't see it all on the screen, but here's our activities that go along with this all the way up until the 1920s. And there are various places that you can not only find materials, but you'll also get audio versions of this. So let's click on this one and we'll listen to this one as well. So it's going to give you an overview of what's coming. So here we go.
A wartime boom. Europe became engaged in World War I in 1914. Busy fighting, these nations struggled to feed their citizens and soldiers. The U.S. Food Administration and the United States Department of Agriculture urged American farmers and ranchers to step up production to meet increased demand at home and abroad. Agricultural exports soared and farm prices more than doubled. This boom renewed business interest in farming, and in 1916, President Woodrow Wilson signed the Farm Credit Loan Act to provide long-term loans to farmers. With money for expansion, farmers purchased nearly 50,000 tractors and put 40 million acres of new land into production in 1917. The war effort also saw meat production swell by more than 20%. The explosion of agriculture fueled a search for methods to bring more land into production. Agricultural scientists like John Widsoe developed methods for dry farming that made it possible to grow wheat and hay in arid areas of the United States without irrigation.
Okay, now the one thing I will show you is what he just read is also down below. So you see all of this activity that goes right along with it. I really like this aspect of Growing a Nation. So if we click on another, we'll click out of that one, and we click on another activity, we talk about, you'll notice some, let's pick on this one, the rural roots. So under rural roots, it talks about what was going on in the rural areas. 40% of rural homes lacked indoor plumbing and electricity, as many farmers began seeing began envying city life. How are you going to keep them down on the farm post World War I? How are you going to keep them down on the farm after they've seen Gay Paris? Soldiers went off to World War I, came back, and how are they going to come back to the farm? Some people said, you know, how are you going to keep them down on the farm after they've seen the farm? It wasn't even just getting out of town. If they stopped and looked around, things weren't very good. However, what you see underneath this are a number of other activities that go along with this. So Rural Roots, it says that there are 3 embedded activities. The first one, American Nutrition Becomes a Science. So what we've got is we've got a silent film here. We've got a silent movie about food making a difference. There's information here about Calvin Coolidge, and also about Dr. Louise Stanley, the first the first chief of the Bureau of Home Economics. So the USDA's Bureau of Home Economics. So again, activities to go along with this within Growing a Nation. All right, so now I need to go back, stop sharing this. All right, and I'm going to go to a screen share, and I'm going to go to my next activity and back to here, share. All right, so I'm back at the slideshow. Again, growinganation.org is where you're going to find this information. So with that, another place, and the person who asked about this before, I'm going to show you where this is on agclassroom.org, agclassroom.org. This is the National Ag in the Classroom website. If you click under Curriculum Matrix, first thing, the curriculum matrix, that sounds really important. It's all their lesson plans, and they're all linked together with tags. And if you type in history, this will pop up, and it will show you all of the activities that go along with history. There is the, I need to go back, sorry. There are the activities, click here, no. What I was trying to do was scroll down, but this isn't the, this is the PowerPoint, not the actual website. So we'll stop sharing and we will go to the website. Share, here we go. We're gonna go to www.agclassroom.org. That's the National Ag in the Classroom website. We'll scroll down to Curriculum Matrix and we'll type in history. All right, H-I-S-T-O-R-Y. We'll type in history and we'll search this, and it will pull up all of these various facets that go along with that. And you'll notice all of these activities that go along with history. At the beginning, they have lesson plans, all right? And then they, as you continue scrolling down, you will find all of these activities to go along with Growing a Nation. We keep scrolling, these are all lesson plans. Then we have these activities and companion resources, all right? So that's where you're gonna find those. The activity to go along with, that interest inventory. You also see some kits that they have available for sale, multimedia, all sorts of stuff going along with history. You'll find the information right in there, and including, again, Three Sisters Garden, Native American Garden, so all sorts of stuff on history. The cool part about this is as well, sorry, I'm a little Blair Witchy on you, so scrolling up and down, you can sort this by grade level, content area, ag literacy outcome, don't worry about those, Common Core, or lessons submitted by specific states. So that's where you're gonna find those materials. Again, the other thing you can do is on growinganation.org, if we scroll back to the top and we go to explore the instructional resources, this will take you into all of the instructional resources that go along with this. So, instructional resources, Seeds of Change, that's where we're gonna talk about this. It's under Seeds of Change. And for the person who asked, you go into instructional resources, click on Seeds of Change, that's where it first came from. And our good old days inventory sheet is located right down here. Our good old days inventory sheet. You will see the inventory sheet is in the good old days inventory sheet. So here's the lesson that goes right along with them, and you can just download the activity and the inventory sheet. So that's the activity, and that's where you can find it. That's where you can find it. So here's the essential file in the good old days inventory sheet, the lesson that goes right along with it, and you'll see it right there. Or just in the title of it, type in good old days inventory sheet and it'll take you right to it. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing there and I'm gonna go back to my sharing my screen of my PowerPoint. And here we go. So we've completed this activity with our inventory sheet and from my current slide. All right. And we've talked about where you'll find those materials. So that's a little look at U.S. history and where it comes from. I want to talk a little bit about Illinois and Illinois history. And one of the things we are proud of is our Illinois History Ag Mag. If you're not familiar with our Ag Mags, again, they're available in classroom sets of 30 from your Ag Literacy Coordinator, plus they're online. Our online version have these little green leaves. Those are embedded resources that'll take you back to where that information is from. The other thing that the Ag Literacy Coordinators have for you are magic kits. Multidisciplinary, that's the M. Agriculture, that's the AG. Integrated curriculum. They are lessons from math, science, social studies, language, arts on various topics. And there is an Illinois kit. There is a kit and it's a big tub. Actually, some of them might have made it into 2 tubs, but it has all of this information that you would see here, including this huge lesson booklet with activities and interest approaches, plus all of the materials you would need to use to conduct many of the experiments, plus some really cool activities, books, and materials. I really like these Investigate Illinois cards to talk about what goes on. Check these out with your county coordinator. Contact your county coordinator. A number of them have updated and refined and added materials to them. But let's just take a look at an activity. This is a cool interest approach. And those of you looking on your iPhone, sorry, this is a really small screen. But one of my favorite activities is people don't understand Illinois counties and where they're from. People don't understand Illinois counties and where they're from. So what I want to talk about are our trip through Illinois. There is a list, and it's a good interest approach. It's a good beginning to talk about all of the different counties across Illinois. So on the right-hand side, my right, your left probably, but what I see on my screen are the names of all the counties. And then I've got, well, what are these materials? So let's look at these, and there are 10 questions here. We'll do the first one together. Name a county that also shares the same name as a piece of furniture. All right, so you got 102 counties there. Furniture, couch, chair, bed. Well, what about a bureau? A bureau, like a chest of drawers. Do you see what we've got here? So silently and quietly to yourself, take a look at those, see how many you can come up with. All right, so, and put those in the chat feature. So share those in the chat feature with that. So take just a minute and see what you come up with. All right, so a bureau is a piece of furniture. That is our first activity. A bureau is a piece of furniture. Our fishing place is a lake. How about a boy's name? Well, that could be just about anything. Cass, Fulton, Marshall. You could use a number of those activities, but a boy's name, Douglas, Edgar. All right. A breed of dairy cattle. Well, that's Jersey. That's Jersey. A colorful county. Interestingly enough, we have green and brown and white. Right. A well-known fruit jar. A well-known fruit jar. Mason jars. That's mason jars. There is no ball, but mason. A person who prepares food. That would be cook. A state or a variety of apple. Washington apples. Our state capital is here. Our state capital is in Sangamon County. And finally, an Indian tribe, a county named after Native Americans. Well, you have a number of them. You got Winnebago, you have Iroquois, you have Vermilion, so Peoria, Kaskaskia. You have a number of activities that are named with Native American influences, again, given the location where we're from. This activity can be found in the Magic Kit. The Illinois Magic Kit. Contact your Ag Literacy Coordinator to get a copy of this. But my activity with this is, counties are still important. I'm constantly shocked when we do pre-service workshops, the number of students that don't have any clue what county they're living in when they go to college. So when we're working with pre-service teachers, they're like, yeah, what What county are we living in? I don't know. Well, how do you take shelter if there's a tornado? Well, what do you know? Counties are important, and it's a local form of government. Again, as a former history teacher, that's something that really, I think is important. Understanding where the counties are and where they're from. In our Ag Mag, one of the first things that we talk about are our first people. Illinois doesn't just start 202 years ago. Illinois goes way back, and we take a look at the various periods throughout Illinois history, including the Archaic, the Middle Woodland, the Mississippian, the Illinois or Illinois people, as well as the more recent Native Americans as we start coming. What we did was we took this after the Illinois State Museum. And unfortunately, the museum is still closed. It's just now starting to open back up. But if any of you are able to take field trips next spring, and a lot of people do go to the Lincoln Museum, the Illinois State Museum is just down the road from the Lincoln Museum. And it is worth a good hour to hour and a half of your time or your students' time. And one of the things that they have here, and I actually did a screen grab of their website, they actually have this diorama, and you walk through the various stages of Native Americans as they are being represented in Illinois. The link to the bottom of this does include a set of posters that you can purchase from the State of Illinois Museum. You get 4 posters, they're $8. They come and they look just like the dioramas. They have great information on the front, but the other part, they have phenomenal information on the back. So it's a really good poster set to stop and think about. If you want to learn more about Illinois history, unfortunately, the State Museum site doesn't do it justice for that material. The posters are very good. So if you do have any money left, that would be in your budget. If you do have a budget, that would be worth considering. In our website, agintheclassroom.org, we actually have a link here that takes you to a place called Agriculture of the Past that pairs up perfectly with that poster series. And one of the things that we ask students to do is take a look at this. Take a look at the poster, and as you notice all the different posters, find 3 examples of agriculture that you recognize from today. Well, in our archaic period, they were hunters and gatherers. From the archaic period up into the Mississippian period, we go from hunters and gatherers to when we finally start planting crops. So you start to notice what was there. Another activity is to find a tool made by hand in each poster. By the time you get up to the historic Kaskaskia and our modern Indians, I mean, you're looking, I'm not a big person to go on camps and stuff, but when my son was in Scouts, we went, heck, I would have died for one of these little shindigs at our Boy Scout camp. It's relatively modern, but this is about 1800. And again, you start to see the influence of American settlers moving into the Illinois territory with things like our metal pot, with our iron pot. And this Native American does have a gun that has obviously been traded for some reason or something like that. So a great poster series from the state of Illinois. And if you do get a chance, these are for sale in their gift shop as well. All right, so that's Agriculture of the Past. Next up, we talk a little bit about our founding fathers, the founding fathers of the state of Illinois. And I really like this because sometimes you think, what's going on in the state capitol? Nine Edwards, picture of Nine Edwards, he was the first territorial governor of the state of Illinois. His cousin was Nathaniel Pope, and Nathaniel Pope served as the Illinois Territory Representative to Congress. Pope's nephew was Daniel Pope Cook, who was a supporter of Illinois statehood. Cook would serve in the U.S. House of Representatives as our second representative. Both Cook and Pope were anti-slavery supporters. And our first representative was John McLean, who was in favor of slavery expanding into Illinois. So you have this faction of slave, anti-slave. Again, going back to Hamilton over the weekend, you saw that activity, you saw that as an underlying activity of what's been talked about on social media since. But when Illinois became a state, War of 1812 war hero Shadrach Bond was elected governor. So I like how all these things are kind of lined together and how they all work out. But if you'll notice, these counties, there are counties named after each of these. There are counties named after each of these founding fathers. So I want you to stop and think about, where did the counties come from and where did our names come from? A link that I provided for you talks about these. Here are some of the county names, and this is from the Secretary of State's site. Ben Franklin for Franklin County, Gallatin County, he was Secretary of Treasury. My favorite might happen to be Amos Kendall, and our folks in Kendall County, up in the Yorkville, Aurora-ish area, that kind of stuff. Kendall was the Postmaster General under the Jackson administration. Well, folks, we still have a Postmaster General at the national level. Do you think we'd name a county after him? What would we do, and why was it so important back then? Well, again, there was no computer. There were no telephones. There were barely roads in this part of the state. So what we wanted to do was suck up to the Postmaster General to get post offices here. How do you do that? Naming a county after them. So I did include Lee, Richard Henry Lee, a member of the Virginia Continental Congress. And he was a senator from Virginia. Lee County, that's where our friend Natalie Pratt, who gave one of our first field trips, where she was from. So I like this idea of finding out where your counties were from, which takes us to another cool place. And again, this under cyberdriveillinois.com publications. How did the counties first get established? And this is a great activity. It's a great visual for your students. And you see where the counties are from. You see where the counties are from. So if you'll notice, this picture is from Illinois as part of the Northwest Territory. And you see there were 2 counties back then. Up in this area, right along the Illinois River, that's where we really didn't start. We used to be part of Indiana, this part of the state, the southeastern 2/3, that was part of Indiana, and the northwestern 1/3, that was part of Wisconsin. But you did see there is a Knox County, and you see there is a St. Clair County. Currently, St. Clair County is down here, but Knox County is over here. Now, it's interesting to stop and think about, why might Knox County go from the south and the east part of the state to be in a northwestern county? Well, it's not. If you go across the river down here into southwestern Indiana, so southeastern Illinois, southwestern Indiana, Knox County is where Vincennes, Indiana is located. Later, this part is going to be shoved off to the side, and that's going to be Knox County. Knox County is going to be Knox County, Indiana. Again, where Vincennes, Indiana is located. Vincennes does play an important part of Illinois history, because that's where there was a Revolutionary War victory in Vincennes back in the time of the Revolution. So the final 2 counties, kind of an important role here. The final 2 counties. Douglas County was the next to the last county. Douglas County is located here in the central part of the state, east central Illinois, and east central Illinois. Douglas County was actually formed, and if you look, it's right just south of Champaign County. Douglas County was formed from Coles County. After the Lincoln-Douglas debate, we took Coles County and we cut it in half. Coles County was roughly the same size as Champaign and Vermilion and Edgar in this area, but they took Coles County and they cut it in half. Well, why didn't they cut like McLean in half, or Cook, or Will? Why didn't they cut one of these other counties in half? Well, Edward Coles was our 2nd governor of the state of Illinois. He was a staunch abolitionist. Coles left Virginia for the Northwest Territory to escape slavery and basically to make sure that slavery didn't spread. He kept Illinois as a free state during his term of governor. And after his term of governor, although he originally came from the southwestern side in the Edwardsville area, after his term of governor, he left Illinois and retired to Pennsylvania. Douglas, everybody thought Douglas was going to be, during the Lincoln-Douglas debates, Douglas was going to be the next president. Everybody was sure of it. So we needed to get a county named after Douglas. So what they did was, Douglas believed in states' rights. not necessarily pro-slavery, but the state gets to choose. Coles was an abolitionist. Look what they did. They took Coles County. He left the state. He was in a different position than Douglas was. They took their county and cut it in half. So that was the final county, the final two. First was Douglas. I like to tell that story because I'm from Douglas County. I'm from the southeastern corner of Douglas County, where I grew up. But agriculture does play a role in the way that other counties were formed, specifically Ford County. Ford County. So Ford County was basically a swamp, and Ford County sits right on top of Champaign County, again on I-57 on your way to Chicago. But there were swampy areas, and when they invented tile drainage, we invented tile drainage to drain the soil. Then we were left with this really, really fertile soil on top, and they use these terracotta. Lines that these tiles that they placed underground to drain the water to ditches, leaving behind fertile soil. Once Ford County was drained, it became usable land, and that's where we get into. So Ford County, again, you see Douglas County here, Champaign, Ford County. On I-57, you're going to go up and hit Paxton right here before you go on up into Kankakee, Will, and Chicago. But one important thing about Ford County, it was established in 1859, and it's the home of Drummer Township. For those of you who aren't aware, townships are 6 mile by 6 mile square areas. They are a taxing body. Check your taxes. You pay a township tax. They support roads. They support bridges. They support people. There is actually a general welfare aspect for all of the people of the township as well that you're paying a tax for. Drummer Township is located in Gibson City. It's at the intersection of Route 9 and Route 47. And actually right outside of Gibson City, where the Secretary of State's office is, if you want to get your driver's license there, and right between that and the Dairy Queen, there's a little cemetery, and it's Drummer Township Cemetery. Drummer Township's really important because Drummer Township is where our state soil is named after. Drummer soil occurs in over 1.5 million acres in the state. You can see on this map over here, the darker color is where all the Drummer soil is located, covering again about the top 2/3 of the state. Why is that important? Well, it goes back to the glacier. The glacier came down, so scratched it all across, then retreated, leaving Drummer soil in its wake. So that history behind where our materials come from, where our names come from. A couple other key facts in our Ag Mag include Joseph Glidden. And Glidden was the inventor of barbed wire. Glidden invented barbed wire. He, at one point in time, was the wealthiest man in America. He was one of the wealthiest men in America, and he opened up a very school. He gave 63 acres of his land to become the North Normal School, which we now know as Northern Illinois University. Glidden, if you ever get off and want to go to Northern Illinois University off of the interstate there, you get off at Annie Glidden Road. So the history behind that activity. Another cool activity here is West Elgin Butter. Elgin Butter. I have a personal connection to this as well, as I got married in 1990. My sister got married a year after, and one of the things we all had to have was Pfaltzgraff in our butter bowl, our butter dish. In 2000, my sister, after being married for 10 years, she and her family moved to Arizona, took their butter dish with them. She gets out to Arizona and she says it's the craziest thing. Sticks of butter are different out west. Our sticks are the long sticks like you see. Out on the West Coast, you find butter that looks more like a cream cheese block. It just looks different. It's called the Western Stubby. Back in the day, Elgin was the butter capital of the world. And they used to just make butter. Well, then they finally decided to cut it and slice it. They actually came up with a new term. It's called the butter printer. And that's how that was the standard until the 1950s. And then all of a sudden we see a shift, and California and dairies and Oregon, and people are making butter on the West Coast. They developed a new one, and there are two types of butter now, Western Stubbies versus Elgin butter. Don't want to believe me? Go onto the Food Network and Google Elgin butter. So with that, a couple of cool activities. One thing I highly encourage you to do is visit your local museum. If it's open, find out about that local history. That's where you're going to find these things about Joseph Glidden and how important he was. And he founded Northern Illinois University, but he invented barbed wire. And how did he invent barbed wire? And where did it come from? And how did it not only change Illinois, but change the West? And the idea of Elgin butter. Again, something that we take for granted has Illinois history and Illinois roots. I am a firm believer, and you will find this material locally as well. So check out your local history museums and see what you got. I'm going to quickly go through a couple of cool books for you. Again, we talked about Farmer George Plants a Nation by Peggy Thomas, and Thomas Jefferson Grows a Nation. Those of you who see these, you'll notice on Farmer George the unique detail of this portrait versus the kind of artsy, folk arty look of Thomas Jefferson Grows a Nation. One interesting fact about our book writers is the authors of the books do not choose the illustrators of the books. When I first saw Thomas Jefferson, I was like, oh, I don't think I'm going to like this. But don't judge a book by the cover. It is a very, very good book, and actually the art works well with it. Another book for you, The Superlative A. Lincoln. The Superlative A. Lincoln, poems about our 16th president by Eileen Myers. This is a 2020 Illinois Read selection, and it does talk about Lincoln being a farmer. And it starts out he's one distracted farmer. He'd readily agree. He'd like to chuck his farm chores. He'd rather sit and read. And it walks through Lincoln, and he's farming, but he doesn't really want to. Each poem is accompanied by outstanding back matter. There's wonderful history that goes along with that. Another cool part that I like is another book that we have called Mr. Lincoln's Whiskers, and it talks about, I like this because it talks about the humanity of Lincoln. Actually correspondence with a young female writer that talks about him, should you grow a beard? In addition, another great book by Tracy Nelson Maurer, John Deere, That's Who. Talking about John Deere and what goes on and who did this, and it gives you the story of John Deere. We can't forget another Peggy Thomas book, George Washington Carver for Kids, His Life and Discoveries with 21 different STEM activities, a great book by Peggy Thomas. For our reluctant readers, you'll also find a number of graphic novels that have a historic connection. Highly encourage you to check out these. George Washington and Carver, Ingenious Inventor. There's one on Levi Strauss. There's one on Louis Pasteur by Nathan Olson. So highly encourage you to look at those. And again, one more, The 100-Year Barn. I really like this because as you drive across Illinois, no matter where you're from, one of the things that you'll see a number of activities going along with barns and where they come from. And this one talks about the history of a barn. This talks about the history of a barn, and it walks you through the family aspect of the history of a barn. Got a couple comments in the chat section. Can't say you're thrilled that McLean was a supporter of slavery. It's interesting to think about what you know and what you don't know. I highly encourage you to look at this with your students. Another cool activity would be, okay, what are you going to name the county after now? Right? So what are you going to name the county after now? And okay, so maybe we didn't like that. Should we change the name of McLean County? Did they know? Where did it come from? The same thing with Native American tribes and named after Native American tribes, our county history, where did it come from? So civic engagement and talking about the history behind it. Don't necessarily have a forum for that right now, but interestingly enough to stop and see. All right, I've exceeded my time. I've exceeded my time, and I really want to thank you for joining us. Our field trip this week. Hope you can join us on Thursday. Join us on Thursday here again. We're taking a history-themed field trip. History? Yeah, we're going to a museum. We're going to the Staley Museum in Macon County in Decatur. We're going to talk about A.E. Staley and the history of Decatur and the town because the importance of Staley and Decatur. Any of you have ever traveled through Decatur, you might have noticed an odor. Some of you might say it smells. Some people say it smells like money, but we're going to talk about what Staley did and how he took agricultural products and made them into things usable. Plus he had something fun for his workers to do. And that fun thing was play football. and we'll talk a little bit about football and the history all behind it. I hope that you'll join us on Thursday. For our trip to the Staley Museum. With that, teachers, I thank you for your time. I hope you have a great week. Stay cool out there, and join us on Thursday. Thank you, everyone. Make sure you fill out the form. Got 3 more books to send. You'll notice some of the titles that were here. So I got 3 winners for that. Thank you very much, everyone.